Let me take you back to a time when the land still whispered its secrets, and not all trees were silent. Nestled between the hills and thick groves of the southwest, there once lived a quiet village called Oja. It was not the biggest nor the wealthiest, but it held something more powerful than gold: tradition. People there walked with the spirits of their ancestors. Every stone, every bird call, every gust of wind was believed to carry meaning, and no one took nature for granted. At the very edge of this village, beyond the last row of yam farms and cassava ridges, stood a tree. It was a tree like no other, taller than three men standing on each other's shoulders, its bark a strange reddish brown, and its leaves dark, almost black, as though it drank more than just water. It stood alone. No other tree dared grow beside it. Even animals avoided its shade. The villagers called it Igi Eje, the tree of blood. Children were warned from an early age, "Be careful, my child. Do not go near the blood tree. It weeps blood." Now you must understand, this was not some old wives' tale to keep children obedient. Generations had passed down the same story, unbroken. Hunters swore they'd seen the bark cry blood after hearing footsteps near it. Once a man had tried to cut it down to sell as firewood. The very next day, his first son went missing in the bush, never to be seen again. So the tree stood, untouched, respected, and feared. It became part of the land's unspoken laws. Even the most stubborn men lowered their voices when they passed it. Even the boldest warriors offered silent prayers when the wind rustled its leaves. But as with all sacred things, there is always someone who dares to test what should be left alone. And in this village, that someone was a boy named Adégún. Long before the village of Oja had clay pots or carved drums, long before the hunters tamed the wild bush for farming, the elders say that tree was already there. Some believe it grew overnight, sprouting from the earth, the same morning the sun rose blood red and the village dogs howled without cause. Others claim it was born from sorrow, rooted in pain. What everyone agreed on, however, was this: that tree was not ordinary. It bore no fruit. Its flowers, when they came, were deep crimson and wilted within hours, and its bark, rough like scaly skin and warm to the touch, even in harmattan. Birds never perched on its branches, not even vultures. The old priestess, Yalorisa Morieba, said the tree was the final resting place of Oluwafemi, a woman whose name had been erased from village songs, whose story had been swallowed by shame. In hushed tones under moonlight, some of the elders whispered the tale. Oluwafemi had been a healer, gifted by the river spirits. She could read herbs, calm fevers, and dream of births before they happened. But envy is a snake that slithers even in peaceful villages. One dry season, when crops failed and 2 children died mysteriously, the blame pointed to her. Accused of dark magic, she was condemned without trial. The villagers tied her beneath a twisted fig tree at the edge of the bush and left her to the gods. That night, lightning struck that very spot, and in the morning the fig tree was gone. In its place stood a tall, blood-red tree, trembling, as if it had a heartbeat. Since then, any act of harm near that tree, cutting, scratching, even spitting, was met with strange signs. Chickens laying black eggs, dreams filled with screams, wells drying overnight. Every child in Oja grew up hearing one sentence like a chant: "Do not provoke the tree that weeps, or you will make the land remember what it tried to forget." And most obeyed. Most. But not Adégún. To him, it was just a tree with stories wrapped around its trunk like vines. He had never seen blood drip from its bark. He had never heard the cries in the wind, and the world to him was full of things waiting to be proven wrong. The elders said he had a sharp mind and a sharper tongue, and sometimes sharp things cut too deep. Because while others avoided the tree, Adégún started watching it. He wanted to know what made the tree so feared. And one day, when no one was looking, he decided to go closer. Adégún had never known his parents. His mother, it was said, had died during childbirth. His father, a brave hunter, had gone deep into the forest one rainy season and never returned. Some believed he was taken by spirits. Others whispered he had run away from grief, but no one could say for sure. The boy was raised by Baba Ogunleye, an old herbalist who lived on the outskirts of the village. Baba was a quiet man, with hands as steady as carved stone and eyes that seemed to see more than the present. He didn't smile often, but when he did, it was usually when speaking to his herbs or teaching Adégún how to identify the difference between bitter leaf and ephedrine. Under Baba's care, Adégún grew to be clever, observant, and bold. Too bold, some said. "Your tongue is too sharp for your age," the market women often told him, and he would grin and say, "It's better than having no voice at all." But what truly set Adégún apart was his mind. He asked questions others were too afraid to ask. Why can't we go near the tree? What if it's just red sap and not blood? If it's cursed, why has no one cut it down and ended the curse? Each time he asked, Baba Ogunle would shake his head and say, "Not everything in this world is for your understanding, my boy. Some things you respect because your spirit knows better than your mouth." But the boy couldn't help himself. Every evening after fetching firewood or gathering herbs, Adégún would wander toward the edge of the forest, where the tree stood like a silent watchman. He would sit on a rock not too far watching it. He noticed how birds avoided its branches, how the grass near its base was always damp, even in dry season. He saw villagers cross the path quickly, whispering prayers, but still, no blood. To him, it looked like any other tree. The idea that it could weep blood seemed exaggerated, one of those tales adults used to keep children obedient. So one afternoon, when the sun burned low and Baba Ogunleye had gone to the village shrine, Adégún picked up his small knife, one he used to peel yams, and walked toward the tree. Each step closer, the air grew thicker, as if the world was holding its breath. Still, he pressed on. When he stood before it, he could feel its presence, not just with his eyes, but with something deeper, something under his skin. He swallowed. Then slowly he reached out with his knife and carved the first letter of his name into the bark. Nothing happened. So he carved the second. D. Still nothing. Then the third. A. The moment his blade pulled away from the bark, a thick droplet oozed out from the cut. But it wasn't sap. It was dark. Too dark. And it smelled like iron. Adégún stared. Another drop fell, then another, and then the tree breathed, not with sound, but with movement, a trembling in the air. The leaves above him rustled though there was no wind. His heart raced. Suddenly, the village gong echoed in the distance, calling everyone to evening prayers. He turned and ran, faster than he'd ever run before. But something followed him. Not footsteps, not whispers, not even sound. It was a feeling, a weight behind his shoulders, as if eyes were now watching from inside that tree. That night, Adégún could not sleep, because in his dream, a woman with red eyes stood beneath the tree, tears on her cheeks, blood dripping from her fingertips, and she called his name. The next morning, Ago Oja was unusually quiet. The birds that normally chirped at dawn were silent. The goats in their pens refused to bleat. Even the market women, who always gossiped as they laid out okra and pepper, whispered instead. Adégún woke up with sweat on his brow and fear in his chest. He told no one about what he had done. But his eyes, those wide, restless eyes, betrayed him. Baba Ogunleye watched him closely that morning, saying nothing, just sipping his bitter herbs slowly. Elders always know when something has been disturbed. By midday, the signs had begun. First, Tanimola, the farmer whose land sat closest to the blood tree, found his goats dead. No wounds, no illness, just stiff bodies and eyes wide open in terror. Then the village's only well turned murky. Its clear water darkened into a red-brown shade. The women screamed, believing it was blood. By sundown, a heavy wind swept through the village. It wasn't the harmattan. This wind was thick, with the smell of old earth and palm oil smoke, like a funeral that never ended. Still, Adégún said nothing, but his silence did not stop the dreams. That night she returned. In the dream, she stood even closer, this time beneath the moonlight. Her skin was cracked like dry clay and her eyes were endless red. She didn't speak at first, just wept. The blood from her hands dripped onto the soil and turned into roots. Then she said softly but sharply, "Why did you call me?" Adégún woke with a scream that rattled the roof. Baba Ogunlaye burst into the hut, holding a calabash of herbs. "What did you do?" he demanded. I I don't know, the boy stammered, but tears betrayed him. Don't lie to me, boy. Something's been awakened, and I can smell your fear. Adégún broke. He fell to the floor and confessed how he had approached the tree, how he carved his name into its bark, how the blood oozed out, how the air trembled. Baba sat down slowly, gripping his staff. You have offended a spirit that was sleeping. But it was just a tree, Adégún whispered, still trembling. Baba's eyes burned. There is no such thing as just in this world. Everything is something, especially the things we do not understand. At dawn, the village drum sounded, not in celebration but in summon. The people gathered in the open square. The Yalorisa, priestess Morieba, stood tall in her white robe, her face painted in sacred chalk, her voice strong. Igi Eje has been violated, she declared. The tree has wept. The land is shaking. Everyone gasped. Someone has awakened the spirit, and until this person steps forward, more blood will be claimed. Not just from goats, but from us. Eyes darted across the crowd. Mothers clutched their children. Elders clutched their walking sticks. Some whispered names, some looked to the sky. But Adégún stood still, alone, sweating, and for the first time in his life, afraid not of death, but of being the cause of it. His feet moved before his mind did. He stepped forward. It was me, he said. I didn't believe. I touched the tree. Gasps rippled like thunder through the crowd. But Priestess Moriba said nothing. She only looked at him with ancient eyes, then turned toward the forest. Then you must come, she said, tonight, to the tree. That night the moon refused to rise. Clouds gathered above Ago Oja like a mourning cloth, dark and still. The air was thick, not just with humidity, but with tension. Every hut closed its doors early. Children were told not to cry. Fires were dimmed to embers. Only one path remained lit, the trail leading to Igi Eje, the tree that wept blood. At the head of the path stood Iya Lorisa Morieba, holding a staff wrapped with white cloth and cowrie shells. Beside her, drummers beat slow, steady rhythms, not for dancing, but for summoning. Adégún walked in silence between them, his feet bare, a white cloth tied around his waist. Behind him, Baba Ogunleye followed, whispering prayers in a tongue even the trees would recognize. No one else came. The tree stood waiting. It did not sway. It did not creak. It watched. Priestess Morieba stepped forward and placed her palm on the bark. I hear you, she whispered. Speak. The leaves shivered. Then the air bent in a way that made sound seem thick, as though words were crawling from under the ground itself. Her body jolted slightly, and then her mouth opened, but it was not her voice that came out. It was the voice of a woman, cold, wounded, ancient. You buried me. You forgot me, but pain remembers. Adégún fell to his knees. I didn't know. I didn't mean. The voice continued. He carved my name without knowing me, but the land knows me. My blood lives in these roots. Then the priestess's hands trembled, and from her eyes, tears fell, but not hers. Adégún looked up. I'm sorry, he whispered. Please tell me your story. I want to understand. The wind calmed. Then slowly, like peeling the skin of a yam, the spirit spoke through Morieba again. My name was Oluwafemi. I was healer, midwife, dreamer. I gave life until they accused me of taking it. I was buried beneath this earth, alive, while my voice still cried for justice. My soul could not go. My roots grew upward, not down. And so I became this tree. Adégún wept openly now, not out of fear, but sorrow. The spirit's voice softened. I do not want revenge. I want remembrance. I want peace. The drum stopped. Silence fell. Then the priestess collapsed gently into Baba Ogunleye's arms, the spirit having left her body. All eyes turned to the tree. From the place Adégún had carved, another drop of blood fell, then stopped, and in its place clear sap began to ooze. The curse had not lifted, but the spirit had spoken. And now something had to be done. The night after the spirit spoke through Iyalorisa Morieba, the village did not sleep. Not because of fear this time, but because of remembrance. Around quiet fires, the elders spoke names they had long buried. Names of women who had disappeared. Names of midwives who once brought life into the world, only to vanish when crops failed or sickness came. The people began to see what they had ignored for generations, that not every outcast was a curse. Sometimes the cursed ones were the liars and the cowards who feared power they did not understand. Adégún remained silent. He sat before Baba Ogunleye's shrine, eyes fixed on the flame of an oil lamp. He had carved 3 letters, but he had uncovered 3 centuries of pain. He now knew that the tree was more than bark and roots. It was a grave, a tombstone, a warning. Baba Ogunlaye sat beside him and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Guilt is the weight we carry when knowledge arrives too late. But if the spirit wants peace, then we must help her find it. Adégún wiped his eyes. How? The old man stared into the fire. Not with punishment, with offering. Not to the tree, but to the memory. The next day the village gathered once more, this time not for judgment, but for atonement. Priestess Moreba, her voice now fully her own, explained what had to be done. A ritual of remembrance, a cleansing of soul, a naming of the forgotten. A calabash was carved from the sacred Iba tree, used only in rituals for the dead. Into it they poured palm oil, shea butter, kola nuts, ashes from the village hearth, and tears from Adégún himself, fresh tears willingly given. Let his sorrow soften the earth, Morieba said, as she pressed a hand over the calabash. Adégún knelt at the foot of the blood tree once more, this time not with the blade but with humility. He poured the contents of the calabash slowly at its roots, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the bark of the tree shimmered. The carved letters in Adégún's name began to close, not vanish, but heal, like a wound closing in slow motion. From the highest branch of the tree, a single red flower bloomed, the first the village had seen in years. The people gasped. Even the leaves seemed to sigh. The spirit had been heard. The spirit had been named. And the land was quiet again. 3 days after the flower bloomed, the village of Ago Oja prepared for something it had not held in generations, a ritual of redemption. This was no festival of joy. It was a sacred rite, a burial without bones, a mourning with memory. The elders gathered the youth under the Agbo tree near the village square. There they told the full story of Oluwafemi, no longer as a whisper but as truth. Her name was no longer taboo. It was spoken with respect. Her face was painted on cloth, her story sung in the rhythms of the talking drum. Adégún, once the boy who disobeyed, now led the procession barefoot. In his hands he carried a bowl of omitutu, sacred cooling water, made from rain, bitter leaf, and shea. Behind him the priestess followed, her white gown trailing like mist, her face calm. The people walked to the tree in silence, dressed not in colors but in earth tones, with heads bowed and hands open. Even the birds seemed to watch. When they reached the tree, Priestess Moreba raised her hand. This, she said, is not a punishment. This is a cleansing. She instructed Adégún to pour the omitutu around the base of the tree. He did so slowly, whispering, Oluwafemi, we remember you. Then came the final act. Baba Ogunleye handed Adégún a bundle of fresh abo leaves, the same leaves his father once used to treat fever, the same leaves Oluwafemi might have used in her day. Adégún placed them at the base of the tree, along with a carved calabash filled with ogi and epopupa, pap and palm oil, a meal for the spirit. He then knelt, raised his hands, and without shame wept. Not forced tears, not tears of fear, real tears, tears from a heart that finally understood. And as those tears fell to the earth, something extraordinary happened. The dark patch of soil around the tree lightened. The roots absorbed the tears like a blessing. The villagers gasped as the blood stains on the trunk faded into the natural color of bark, and from the highest branches, 3 more red flowers bloomed. The priestess stepped forward. The spirit has accepted. The land is clean. Adégún did not stand immediately. He stayed kneeling, eyes closed, breathing slowly. In that moment, he was no longer just a boy. He had become a keeper of memory, a bridge between the living and the forgotten. From that day forward, the tree never wept blood again. But every year on the same night, red flowers bloomed at its top, reminders that pain can rest if it is remembered with honor. Years passed. The tree still stood at the edge of Ago Oja, tall, dignified, and finally at peace. But it was no longer feared. It became a place, of quiet reflection. Mothers brought their children to lay flowers, drummers played beneath its shade during sacred days, and when young ones asked, "Why does the tree bloom only red flowers?" the elders would smile and say, "Because some wounds, when healed, leave beauty behind." Adégún grew into a man of wisdom, one who never again questioned the unseen without humility. He became a herbalist like Baba Ogunlaye, but with something more, a reverence that couldn't be taught. People came from other villages to seek his counsel, and whenever he was asked about the sacred tree, he never told the story with pride. He told it with respect. He would say, "It is not the tree that was cursed, it was us, for forgetting. But the moment we remembered, we were forgiven." And so the tree that once wept blood became a symbol, not of fear, but of remembrance. Because in our forgetting there is danger, but in remembering there is peace. And as the Yoruba say, Ti a bag bagbe itan, a otun se e. If we forget the past, we will repeat it. So the next time you walk past a tree that seems to listen, pause, bow your head, and remember, not everything old is silent. Some things speak. When you are finally quiet enough to hear them,